And now over to England, where there are hopes of reviving one of the country's oldest industries. From Cornwall, Robert Southgate reports.
200 years ago, there were 2,000 tin mines in Cornwall and Devon. 100 years ago, there were 300. And today, there are just 2 still in production. And the overgrown and crumbling relics of Cornwall's one-time mining boom scar the countryside. But the ever-spiraling world prices for tin, coupled with new methods of mining and extracting the metal, look like producing a second mining boom for Cornwall in the next few years. The mining industry died in Cornwall not because the mines were worked out, but because of a world slump in tin prices in 1890, which killed off most firms, and then the great slump of 1930, which closed the remainder. Today, tin is priced at £1,500 a tonne, and Britain alone imports £350 million worth of copper, tin and lead a year. Mining it is once again a worthwhile gamble. At Wheel Jane near Truro, Consolidated Goldfields are investing £6 million in opening up a new mine. A new shaft is being sunk alongside an old one, and a giant treatment plant is being built. Wheel Jane was closed originally when the old Cornish miners found they couldn't economically separate out the 1% of tin from the material they mined. New techniques will now be used to produce an ore with a high degree of purity.
All right? Yeah, turn air and water on. More.
At present, drives are being hewn through the rock to carry out the ore when mining starts about a year from now. Initially, it's expected to produce 1,200 tonnes of tin a year, and that will almost double Cornwall's present output. Eventually, Goldfields expect an annual yield of 4,500 tonnes. One of the 2 mines that remained in production, South Crofty, plans to double production next year. The investments are huge, but so are the risks. Pendarvis mine near Camborne, a new mine on the site of 25 old ones, announced last week the early results of their £1 million exploration. Output will be much less than they'd hoped, they said, and some men would have to be laid off. The mining industry in Britain is looking to the government for help. Already legislation has been enacted to help the owners of mineral royalties. Until this year, they could be taxed on those royalties at as much as 23 shillings in the pound. That's now been reduced to 13 shillings in the pound. And legislation was planned by the last government to allow arbitration where developers met unreasonable difficulties in acquiring rights. The industry, of course, is now hoping that that legislation will be enacted by the present government. And the industry, too, is looking for some form of taxation relief.
Now, practically every country in the world today, with the exception of Britain, realizes that mining is one of the fundamental and most important industries in the world. But in this country, though the investment grants that we've been enjoying for a few years have been a very real assistance to the industry, we are now faced with the possibility that these investment grants may be withdrawn, and we don't know what is going to replace them. Now, this is a very serious situation because mining companies cannot depend and base their plans on purely ephemeral things that are here today and gone tomorrow. They have to look 1 to 2 decades ahead.
What form would the mining industry like this sort of incentive to take? I mean, the Canadians and the Irish have a 20-year tax holiday. Is this the sort of thing the industry has in mind?
Well, I can certainly say there that it has had a most electric effect in Ireland in reviving the industry, and the industry here would naturally be pleased to see some such thing. But if for some reason that is politically inexpedient, then some other means must be found to encourage the industry in the way that it is now being done all over the rest of the world. Otherwise, this most important industry, important potentially, and one that's already making a very considerable contribution to the national finances, is going to stay just where it is instead of expanding on a very considerable scale, as we are confident that it can do.
The mines, if successful, will provide new jobs in Cornwall, where the unemployment swings between 2% in summer to 7% in winter when the tourists go home. And the jobs are not only in the mines. There's employment in ancillary trades. In Truro, Wheeljane Mine is building a 98-house estate for its workers. The new developments are not, of course, without their critics, especially the conservationists. They point to the discoloration of the sea caused by the effluent discharged from Giva. But inland, the problems are easier. Most of the waste from the mines has a ready sale as aggregate for the building trade, and there's little prospect of mountains of rubble building up. At their peak, just 100 years ago next year, the old tin mines like these were producing 10,900 tons of tin a year. Now, whether that figure will ever be reached again or even passed remains to be seen. But there are many other developers watching with great interest the explorations now being carried out, and waiting too to find out the government's intentions. And if they move in, then Cornwall could become the Klondike County all over again.